Listen to how these reporters talk about Hurricanes Harvey and Irma.
How they talk about. So, are we in for a session of language policing?
Hurricane Harvey's unprecedented onslaught of rain.
Onslaught of waves ripping apart the coastline.
They're using language you typically expect to hear about war.
Really? The only connotation of the word onslaught is in relation to a military conflict. Got it.
South Beach right in the line of fire. The Bahamas and Turks and Caicos also in the line of fire.
News networks do this a lot. They cover natural disasters using the same tricks they use while covering war.
The same tricks. Tricks like trying to contextualize a disastrous event in terms that a viewer can understand? Well, okay. What is a more honest way of reporting the onset and aftermath of a natural disaster, Vox? I assume you have a remedy for this dire failing of mainstream journalism?
It basically looks like a war zone.
Compared to a war zone.
War zone.
Looks like a war zone?
Like a war zone.
Yes, like a war zone. It is a simile, Vox. It is a comparison. We only have so many terms or phrases in the English language to encapsulate such things. And this is a problem?
There's dramatic graphics, helicopter shots of widespread destruction, acts of heroism in the face of danger. They even send reporters into hostile territory. Stop putting Chris Cuomo in harm's way. He's a national treasure.
Uh-huh. Well, that aside, did you miss the part in your own video where you begged the news media to be more bombastic and emotional about their political coverage?
If you look at some of the most well-respected journalists on TV, Anderson Cooper, Lester Holt, Wolf Blitzer, they all kind of talk the same way. They're unemotional, even-keeled, and unfazed by the stories they're covering. You could watch Wolf Blitzer on mute and not know if he's talking about the Kardashians or a nuclear missile launch. But in the Trump era, it's made political journalism feel totally inadequate.
So, are you now complaining that the media is overhyping the news and events surrounding massive natural disasters? I would tell you to make up your mind, but I have a feeling it would be a wasted effort.
This wartime approach gives news networks a compelling way to tell stories about things like major hurricanes.
Thankfully, reinforcements are beginning to arrive.
The problem is, when you treat natural disasters like war, you need to find an enemy, some bad guy to fight against. And that's made us all really angry at the wrong things.
That's made us all angry. Oh, really? Yes, please tell me more about how I think and how I feel, Vox. Tell me how easily manipulated I am by the media and how you're so far beyond it all and immune to such things.
The first and most obvious bad guy in any natural disaster story isn't actually a guy. It's
Mother Nature's fury.
Trying to stop Mother Nature.
Mother Nature has no boundaries.
I hate that phrase. The only people you should call mother are your actual mom and RuPaul.
Ha. Ha 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 ha. Oh my sides. Anyway, so using the phrase Mother Nature to encompass the, well, forces of nature to which we are all beholden to when a natural disaster strikes, this is a bad thing? All right. Go on.
News networks use concepts like Mother Nature because it gives audiences a clear culprit to blame for what's happening.
The struggle against Mother Nature continues.
Swirling mess of Mother Nature's fury right now.
It's about making nature like human. And we are, by the way, separate from it.
Yes. The phrase Mother Nature is commonly used to encapsulate a multitude of natural and environmental processes. It is a cultural shorthand. It is not in reference to an actual person. And it is separate from us. I mean, I can't take the jet stream out for drinks. Or can I, Vox?
That's Catherine Fry, who wrote a book on media coverage of the Great Midwest Flood of 1993.
It's a nice storyline, and it's easy because you can easily pick out the good guys and the bad guys, right?
Right.
It's like good guys people, bad guy nature.
Yeah, well, somehow I'm just not too concerned about Mother Nature's feelings on being characterized from time to time as an enemy. Yeah, I know. How insensitive of me not to consider the fragile psyche of an anthropomorphized abstraction.
The problem with this frame is, well, stuff's not that simple. In a lot of cases, human choices explain why natural disasters end up being so catastrophic.
Oh, so wait. Are we moving into a blame the victim session, Vox? Well, this ought to be interesting.
Take Houston, for example.
One of the worst flooding disasters in American history.
One of the reasons Harvey caused so much damage is because developers have been allowed to build over the area's natural floodplains over the past few years. That's put tons of people and property in harm's way, and made it way harder for the area to absorb stormwater like the kind that came from Harvey.
All right, stipulated. Human choices can increase the risk of human fallout from natural disasters. So, what's your solution, Vox? The people of Houston should, what? Not live there? Development in Florida needs to stop? Or to change in some way? All right, I look forward to your solutions to this problem of people making their own choices, for good or ill.
A similar situation has happened in Tampa, where unrestricted development has put people and property right on the city's vulnerable coastline.
A lot of the infrastructure here is very low-lying.
My previous question stands. What is your answer to the problem, Vox?
Barrier islands like Miami Beach, which are supposed to shield the mainland from storms like Irma, are now bustling hotspots, increasing the chances that any major hurricane will cause massive damage.
My question still remains. What is your answer to these problems, Vox?
The problem is made worse by reckless federal policy. The National Flood Insurance Program heavily subsidizes flood insurance, so people are incentivized to keep rebuilding in the same spot.
The family says that they will rebuild.
So, people should be disincentivized to rebuild their homes after a natural disaster? Or are you saying they should be prevented from doing so? What exactly are you advocating for, Vox?
All of this is happening at the same time that climate change is raising sea levels and making powerful hurricanes more likely.
Hold up. Do you have proof that climate change makes hurricanes more likely? Because I have yet to see anything that proves that. But again, are we just having a blame the victim party here? The people hurt the worst by hurricanes only have themselves to blame because of where they live and how big their carbon footprint is?
But last year, the former head of the Harris County Flood Control District said he had no plans to study the effects of climate change on flooding. And Florida Governor Rick Scott has banned government officials from even using terms like climate change and sea level rise.
Okay, I will not argue that people choosing to live in areas at risk for natural disasters are, well, taking a risk. But again, Vox, what exactly is your proposal to the contrary? You're making a lot of complaints here, but you're not offering any solutions. So how will the opinion of a retired water district manager and the non-enforceable ban on a phrase affect the occurrence or disaster of hurricanes, Vox?
None of that is Mother Nature, but news coverage that frames these as humans versus nature stories helps politicians shirk responsibility by depicting Mother Nature as some big, uncontrollable monster we can do nothing about.
Oh, so Mother Nature is a controllable monster that we can do something about? Okay, Vox, by all means. How do you propose to stop a hurricane?
Was the issue poor planning, or is the issue that this storm is just so overwhelming?
A reminder that man is sometimes no match for the forces of Mother Nature.
Which might explain why the Sunday after Irma hit, only one of the Sunday morning news shows even mentioned climate change.
climate change. Again, do you have any proof that climate change causes hurricanes? Because you know, Vox, hurricanes have been happening since the beginning of recorded history, long before the Industrial Revolution and what we might consider to be the real beginning of man-made climate change. But let's say that you are correct. How do we stop hurricanes then, Vox? What is your genius plan?
Sometimes that's the detriment of the bigger context, the larger discussions around why are these natural disasters occurring? Why is so much damage happening?
Why do hurricanes happen? Well, I think you should ask a certified meteorologist, which our author here, Catherine Fry, is not. She has a PhD in mass media and communication. She is neither a meteorologist, a climate scientist, or a civil engineer.
This framing of disaster as war gets worse after the storm is over. That's when news networks focus on a new enemy, dangerous survivors.
Mass devastation in Houston has brought with it a breakdown in law and order.
Caught on camera, a man seen looting from a tanning store in the middle of Hurricane Harvey.
Fears now of looting. Many people say they're carrying guns.
And they're now afraid of looters.
Are you saying that looting does not happen? Are you saying people don't become concerned about looting, whether their fears are justified or not? Are you saying that news outlets should not report on incidents when they do occur, or report that people are worried about the prospect?
Reporters, who often rely on law enforcement and government sources for information, tend to overhype the threat of criminal activity after natural disasters. It's an easy way for news networks to keep that war zone frame going after the storm has passed. There are good guys and bad guys, innocent victims and looters. It's also bullshit.
So it's the news networks that are telling law enforcement to take steps against looting, which is a thing that doesn't happen, except when it does. But even when it does, it's a bullshit concern. Got it.
The looting theme continues to come up even though 60 years of empirical research tells us that looting is quite rare when disasters occur.
That's Kathleen Tierney, who studied the impact of media coverage after Hurricane Katrina.
Okay, they're rare, but they do happen. And so homeowners and business owners are entirely unjustified in taking steps to protect their property before, during, or after a hurricane, and should not request or expect law enforcement to take preventative steps. Is that what you are advocating for, Vox?
They don't loot in disasters unless they're absolutely desperate.
Experts actually agree on this point. Reports of looting tend to be greatly over-exaggerated, but it's become a staple of hurricane coverage, and it can have really dangerous consequences. Fear of looting could convince people in harm's way not to evacuate.
A lot of homeowners have said they are hesitant to leave because they're worried about looters.
Fear of looting could convince people not to evacuate. Well, does it? Or doesn't it?
The looting myth often reflects racist stereotypes like in Katrina, when news reports identified black scavengers as looters, but white scavengers as just looking for food.
Hold on. You want to talk about myths? Let's talk about the myth that you just perpetuated. I am going to call way back to one of my earliest videos, where I addressed this very same accusation of the media coverage during Hurricane Katrina. Now, in this clip, I reference the speaker relevant to that video, John Eckloff, as well as Kanye West, but I could just as well be saying Vox, and the point would remain the same. The controversy over the portrayals of black families versus white families during Katrina stems from a whopping 2 photographs taken during the flooding at different times by 2 different photographers. And here they are. And neither Kanye West or Mr. Eckloff is incorrect in relaying that one photograph describes the individual as looting, and the second photograph as the people finding. But as I said, there is more behind this. In the wake of the controversy, interviews were done with both photographers. Here is what they had to say in part. According to Jack Stokes, the director of media relations for AP, Dave Martin, the photographer of the first picture, personally witnessed the subject of his photograph entering a grocery store and leaving with items, thus witnessing the man looting. Whereas the photographer of the second photo, Chris Grayson, didn't witness the subjects of his photograph taking the goods. Quote, "I wrote the caption about the two people who found the items. I believed, in my opinion, that they did simply find them and not looted them in the definition of the word. The people were swimming in chest-deep water, and there were other people in the water, both white and black. I looked for the best picture. There were 1 million items floating in the water. We were right near a grocery store that had 5+ feet of water in it. It had no doors. The water was moving and the stuff was floating away. These people were not ducking into a store and busting down windows to get electronics. They picked up bread and cokes that were floating in the water." So to say that these two photographs, then, represent portrayals as enacted by the media writ large would be an exaggeration at best and recklessly inflammatory at worst. They are individual and unrelated items in both their creation and descriptions.
Media panic also gives license to politicians and law enforcement to overreact.
Reporting about looting carries a very strong message about the need for authoritarian social control to prop up the idea that we need the cavalry to guard against these unsavory elements that are in our communities.
That overreaction can include aggressive, militaristic responses, like the kinds we saw in the aftermath of Katrina, deploying military units to non-combat situations, enforcing strict curfews that discourage civilian rescue efforts.
Law enforcement and military resources that discourage civilian rescue efforts. Really? They don't also discourage crime? They don't also discourage people from traveling or wandering into dangerous and unstable parts of an affected area? What are you advocating for, Vox? That law enforcement and military resources not be deployed during hurricanes? By the way, are you going to give us any reason to think that the occurrences of looting are as low as you claim because of reasons other than an overwhelming amount of precaution taken by law enforcement?
And ramping up police presence in disaster areas. Steps that Tierney argues could actually make it harder for survivors to get the help they need.
Could actually make it harder. But do they actually make it harder, Vox?
Sometimes the authorities misallocate resources to law enforcement that could be better allocated to actually saving people because of this myth that people are dangerous.
I would love to know where resources could be better allocated to, other than law enforcement, in order to save people, but either she never clarifies, or you cut her off before she could, Vox. So even the people you have on your own video to ostensibly provide answers provide no answers. Got it.
The result is that disaster areas end up looking like the war zones the media compares them to.
Good news there. Troops are on the way. I'm really happy to hear that the Marines are headed in because it does look like a war zone.
Wait. The result of the presence of law enforcement, military forces, and the proposed misallocation of resources, they are the reason that the aftermath of hurricanes look like war zones. It's not the hurricane that caused the destruction, it's the fault of the cops and the National Guard. Got it.
Natural disasters are chaotic and devastating, and it's tempting in the face of that destruction to look for an easy scapegoat, whether it be looters or Mother Nature. But things are just more complex than that, and reducing natural disasters to dramatic us versus them narratives makes it harder to think critically about the choices we make before the next big storm hits.
Reducing natural disasters to an us versus them narrative makes it harder to think critically. What, like the us versus them narrative you have presented here, where us is the enlightened few at Vox and 2 professors, and them is, well, the media, law enforcement, the military, oh, and the whole of humankind associated with climate change? And what exactly was your point here, Vox? We started out being told that the media is using the wrong words when reporting on hurricanes. Of course, You won't tell us the correct words they should be using, only that they're doing it wrong. Then we're told that framing such stories as a man versus Mother Nature narrative is also wrong because, really, human beings are the ones at fault for being hit by hurricanes. You don't tell us how people should address such risks, only that they're doing it wrong. Then we're told of the myth of looting, accompanied by videos of people looting, and scolded because such things never happen, even when they do, and that law enforcement is wasting their time in trying to prevent it. You don't tell us what cops should be doing, other than working to protect life and property after a hurricane, only that they're doing it wrong. So everything everyone is doing, they're doing it wrong. And Vox knows they're doing it wrong because Vox knows the correct way in which to speak, and to think, and to behave in the wake of a hurricane. They just won't share this insight of correct action with the rest of us. Because, you know, we would just end up doing it wrong anyway. As always, thank you for watching.